Raymond's head slammed into the control panel as his ship smashed into the planet's surface. Blood spewed from a gash in his forehead, instantly cauterized by the blistering heat seeping into the cockpit. He yanked hard on the harness release and dragged himself from the blazing wreckage, collapsing onto shattered obsidian rock. Through blurred vision, Raymond surveyed the hellscape around him. Obsidian mountains clawed at the sky. Boiling pools of acid bubbled menacingly. Magma flowed in searing rivers. Volcanoes spewed toxic ash that choked the air. With an atmosphere of fatal carbon monoxide, hydrogen sulfide and particulates, temperatures over 50 degrees, poisonous plants and vicious acid-spitting centipedes, this was the most lethal world ever charted. No sentient life could survive here. The Terran Confederation rated the planet 0.0310 habitability, but Raymond had no choice. He was utterly alone, stranded with only his wits and salvaged gear. Flicking on an emergency beacon, he knew it was futile. The unending electrical storms jammed all signals. No ship would ever find him. He was already dead to the universe. Hefting his plasma rifle, Raymond set to work. He was humanity's greatest survivalist, trained to persevere through anything. This was his ultimate test. He would find a way to live, or die trying. There were no other options. A sudden chattering hiss shattered his focus. Whirling around, Raymond watched in disbelief as an alien creature rose from behind a jagged rock. 10 feet tall, covered in purple exoskeleton plates, with 4 powerful legs and huge bladed forelimbs, it was like no creature he had ever seen. The alien spat unintelligible words that crackled through Raymond's translator. "Who dares trespass on Suliban territory?" Raymond's blood turned to ice in his veins, as his fingers grasped only empty air where his rifle should have been. The mangled, smoking remains of the weapon lay crushed beneath a chunk of wreckage. He was utterly defenseless before this alien monstrosity towering over him. The creature's mandibles clicked and clacked, compound eyes glittering with cruel intelligence as it sized up the human. "Your kind has never before dared to come here, soft meat," it hissed, words translated through Raymond's earpiece. "This planet is the proving ground of the Suliban, a place where our warriors go to test their mettle against the deadliest conditions in the known universe. You will not survive here." Muscles coiled tight, ready to spring into action at the slightest provocation, Raymond pushed himself to his feet. He refused to cower before this brute, no matter how outmatched he was. Squaring his shoulders, he met the alien's gaze unflinchingly. "I've survived conditions that would kill most humans. This planet doesn't scare me." The Suliban warrior, Mizar, made a guttural clicking noise that Raymond's translator didn't even attempt to decipher. But the way those multifaceted eyes flickered, it seemed almost like cruel amusement. "Foolish soft meat. You know nothing of the trials that await you here." In a blur of purple, Mizar lunged, scythe-like forelimbs slashing down at Raymond's head with blinding speed. Pure instinct saved the human, his body reacting before his mind could even process the danger. He rolled to the side, feeling the whisper of wind as the alien's blades cleaved through the space he'd occupied, a split second before, carving deep gouges in the obsidian beneath his feet. Survival instincts kicked into overdrive. Snatching up a twisted shard of metal that had once been part of his ship's hull, Raymond held it before him like a sword. The edges were jagged and razor-sharp. It would have to do. He and Mizar circled each other warily, 2 apex predators sizing up their foe. The alien was first to strike again, scythe arms lashing out in a flurry of slashes almost too fast to see. Raymond parried desperately, the shriek of metal on chitin ringing in his ears as he fought to keep those deadly blades at bay. Sparks flew as they clashed again and again, dancing a lethal tango across the hellish landscape. It was all Raymond could do to stay alive. Mizar had him outmatched in strength, speed, and reach. The human's only advantage was his agility and the lightning-quick reflexes honed by a lifetime of pitting himself against the most hostile environments the universe had to offer. But he couldn't keep this up forever. Already his arms were burning with fatigue, while Mizar showed no signs of tiring. Raymond knew that in a straight fight, there was no way he could beat the Suliban warrior. He needed an edge, and he needed it now. There, out of the corner of his eye, Raymond spotted an outcropping of precariously balanced boulders. A desperate plan formed in his mind. With a final Herculean effort, he deflected Mizar's blades and hurled his makeshift sword at the alien's head. As Mizar ducked, Raymond turned and sprinted for the rocks, weaving erratically as he heard the Suliban warrior snarl and give chase. Reaching the unstable boulders, Raymond whipped around and drove his fist into a hairline fissure in the largest stone. The rock shattered violently, unleashing a thundering cascade of massive boulders tumbling straight towards Mizar. The alien warrior scuttled backwards, spitting curses in its own tongue as it barely evaded being pulverized under the rocky deluge. Not waiting to see if his gambit had worked, Raymond sprinted away, weaving through the hellish landscape until he reached a wide field, pockmarked with hissing volcanic steam vents. Scalding vapor shrieked from fissures in the pitted ground, creating an eerie, ever-shifting fog. Raymond hoped it would conceal him from Mizar, at least for a few precious moments. No such luck. Within seconds he heard the telltale clicking of Mizar's clawed feet on the rocky ground, rapidly drawing closer. The alien was relentless, its powerful legs eating up the distance between them at a terrifying pace. Raymond knew he had no hope of outrunning the tireless Suliban across this brutal terrain. A desperate plan crystallized in Raymond's mind as Mizar closed in. Scooping up a chunk of porous volcanic rock, he spun and hurled it with all his strength directly into the largest steam vent. The geyser exploded. A massive plume of superheated vapor erupted from the vent with incredible force, engulfing Mizar completely. The Suliban shrieked in agony, its cries nearly drowned out by the roar of pressurized steam as the scorching gases seared its exoskeleton. It reeled backwards, clawing at its scalded flesh. Raymond didn't hesitate. Lowering his shoulder, he charged straight at the flailing Suliban and slammed into it at a full sprint. The impact sent them both careening over the lip of a jagged ridge. They hurtled down the steep, rocky slope in a tangle of limbs, obsidian shards slicing into Raymond's suit as they tumbled. With a massive splash, they crashed into the seething, bubbling surface of an acid swamp at the bottom of the ridge. The force of the impact tore Raymond away from Mizar, sending them sprawling to opposite sides of the corrosive mire. The thick, viscous sludge hissed and smoked where it splattered against Raymond's environment suit, already eating through the durable material. On the other side of the gurgling expanse, Raymond staggered up onto relatively solid ground. His suit was pitted and pocked where the corrosive swamp had splashed him, the acid slowly but inexorably chewing through the protective layers. He and Mizar faced each other across the deadly mire, chests heaving from pain and exertion. "So you cannot win this fight, soft meat," Mizar spat, its voice dripping with disdain even through the static of the translator. "And even if you somehow manage to defeat me, you are still doomed. No off-worlder has ever survived here." Mizar's mandibles clacked and chattered in a burst of agitated clicks, compound eyes glittering. In all its time as a warrior, it had never encountered a being quite like this defiant, two-legged creature that refused to accept its fate. There was something unsettling about the human's sheer tenacity in the face of impossible odds. A seismic rumble shuddered through the hellscape, nearly throwing Raymond and Mizar off their feet. The unstable ground between them suddenly split apart, disgorging a blistering gout of lava high into the toxic sky. Searing magma bombs rained down, hissing as they spattered the rocky surface. Raymond leapt back as the widening chasm threatened to swallow him. Mizar scuttled away in the opposite direction, powerful legs propelling it to safety. Casting about desperately, Raymond spotted a cluster of caves carved into a nearby cliffside. Chunks of obsidian crumbled from the cliff's edge, crashing into the frothing lava below. It was now or never. Raymond sprinted for the caves, zigging and zagging as magma bombs exploded around him. Jagged shards of rock whizzed past his head, drawing blood. At the last second, he dove headlong into the nearest cave, feeling the ledge collapse into the inferno behind him. He slammed into the cavern wall, gasping for breath. The cave's dank air pressed in close. Raymond's racing mind seized on one imperative. He needed an edge over Mizar. His eyes caught a faint glow in the gloom, emanating from a patch of luminescent fungi sprouting in the shadows. A snippet of xenobiology training resurfaced. Spores from this species could paralyze many carbon-based life forms. A desperate plan gelled. Raymond grabbed a fistful of the rubbery mushrooms, furiously grinding them into paste between two flat stones. He smeared the noxious gel onto his combat knife, praying the toxins would bite through Mizar's exoskeleton. A chitinous skittering echoed from the cave's depths. Raymond whirled as a seething mass of insectoid horrors swarmed from the darkness, mandibles clacking. Each was the size of a human fist, all chitin and teeth and too many legs. Knife at the ready, Raymond braced for the onslaught, but a barrage of hissing acid sprayed from the cave mouth, sizzling against the stone. The creatures shriveled and smoked into ash. Mizar strode into the cave, its carapace slick with acid. Compound eyes fixed on Raymond, glittering in the bioluminescent light. "There will be no refuge for you here, soft meat," Mizar spat, stalking forward. "You only delay the inevitable." Raymond rose to his feet, knuckles white around the toxic blade. Jaw clenched, he stared down the advancing alien, a human facing the universe's apex predator. Muscles coiled tight, Raymond exploded into motion, charging straight at Mizar. The Suliban warrior's scythe arms flashed out in a deadly arc, but Raymond juked left at the last instant before dodging right, the razor-sharp blades hissing through empty air. Ducking under Mizar's guard, Raymond lashed out with his toxin-slicked knife, the blade finding its mark in the alien's thorax. It bit deep, piercing through the chitin plates. Viscous green ichor welled from the gash. Mizar shrieked, mandibles clacking furiously as it staggered back a step, but the wound seemed only to enrage the Suliban further. Compound eyes blazing, it lunged at Raymond, serrated mandibles clamping down on his torso like a vice. With a heave of its powerful neck, Mizar sent Raymond hurtling across the cave. The human slammed into the far wall with a sickening crunch, pain exploding through his body as the breath was driven from his lungs. His vision swam, going grey at the edges. Blinking hard, Raymond struggled to his feet, shaking his head in a desperate attempt to clear it. The cave spun around him. He could hear the skittering clatter of Mizar's clawed feet on the stone, charging in for the kill. Purely on instinct, Raymond hurled himself to the side, rolling across the uneven ground. A split second later, Mizar's scythe arm punched into the cave wall, right where Raymond's head had been, the blade sinking deep into the rock and impaling there. Mizar strained to pull its arm free, but it was stuck fast. Seizing his chance, Raymond snatched up a fist-sized chunk of stone and brought it down with all his strength on Mizar's trapped limb. The rock smashed into the elbow joint, shattering the exoskeleton plates and pulverizing the delicate mechanisms beneath. Mizar wailed in agony, acidic spittle spraying from its mandibles. With a frantic wrench, it ripped its mangled arm free of the wall, leaving the scythe blade embedded in the stone. Noxious yellow blood spurted from the ruined joint. Raymond pressed his advantage, knife flashing as he aimed a killing strike at Mizar's head. But even maimed and bleeding, the Suliban warrior was far from defeated. It contorted with blinding speed, segmented body twisting at an impossible angle to avoid the blow. Even as Raymond's blade sliced through empty air, Mizar's remaining scythe arm whipped around in a vicious backhand. The serrated edge caught Raymond across the chest, ripping through his environment suit like tissue paper and biting deep into the flesh beneath. Searing agony erupted in Raymond's chest. Hot blood welled from the gash running down his front. He stumbled backwards, one hand clutching the wound, his knife slippery with blood and ichor. Mizar loomed over him, its yellow blood mixing with Raymond's red on the stone floor. The alien's eyes glinted with triumph, its remaining blade arm raised for the final killing strike. Raymond's strength was fading fast, his vision narrowing to a red-tinged tunnel. But suddenly Mizar wavered. The fluidity drained from its movements, its limbs turning stiff and sluggish. The toxins coating Raymond's knife were finally taking effect, the paralytic spores working their way through the Suliban system. In a final burst of desperate strength, Raymond threw himself at Mizar. He crashed into the alien, bearing it to the ground. Straddling its thorax, Raymond raised his knife and brought it down again and again, plunging the blade into the weakest points of Mizar's exoskeleton. His arm rose and fell until it burned with exhaustion, until his hand was slick with the alien's blood, until Mizar twitched once and then fell still. Silence fell over the cave, broken only by Raymond's ragged breathing. Slowly, painfully, he levered himself to his feet, swaying like a drunk. His shredded environment suit hung off him in tatters, barely holding together. Clutching his chest wound, Raymond staggered towards the cave mouth, each step a supreme effort of will. He fixed his eyes on the toxic, lightning-lit sky outside, drawing in a breath of the deadly air that seared his lungs. Leaving Mizar's twitching corpse behind, Raymond stumbled out of the cave and back into the hellscape beyond. His blood left a dripping trail on the rocks as he limped off into the unknown, vanishing into the toxic haze. The toxin-riddled air tasted almost sweet to Raymond as he climbed the treacherous, magma-scarred foothills of the mountain range. His blood sang with adrenaline, his weary muscles infused with new strength by the promise of rescue. The TSS Deliverance was coming, just a little further. He crested a jagged ridge of obsidian and froze. Arrayed before him on a flat expanse of rock stood a group of Suliban warriors, their purple exoskeletons glinting in the hellish light. At their center loomed a massive figure, taller and broader than the rest, its armored plates adorned with pulsing luminescent patterns, a chieftain of some kind. Raymond's hand dropped to the hilt of his combat knife, his body falling instinctively into a fighting stance. But the Suliban leader stepped forward, raising its scythe arms in a gesture of parley. "Human," it clicked, the words hissing through Raymond's translator. "You have proven yourself a worthy adversary. In all the generations my kind have used this world as our proving ground, none have ever survived here as long as you." Raymond eyed the assembled warriors warily, not relaxing his guard. Respect from a Suliban was a rare and dangerous thing. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice a rasp from the corrosive air. The chieftain gestured with a serrated claw towards the looming peaks. "The path to your salvation lies through the heart of fire, a gauntlet of perils that has claimed the lives of countless Suliban warriors. No outsider has ever set foot there and lived." It paused, compound eyes glinting. "I offer you a challenge, human. Prove your worth by traversing the heart of fire. If you survive, my warriors will escort you safely to your rescue ship. But if you fail..." The consequences hung unspoken in the air. Raymond weighed his options, which were few. The path ahead promised new and deadly challenges, but what choice did he have? He met the chieftain's multifaceted gaze, unflinching. "I accept your challenge," he said, his voice steely despite his ravaged throat. "I'll show you what one human can do." The Suliban leader's mandibles clacked, a strangely appreciative sound. "We shall see, human. We shall see." With a last look at his alien observers, Raymond turned and strode towards the waiting mountains, towards the trials that stood between him and salvation. The Suliban watched him go, still and silent, as carved monuments. The path into the heart of fire was narrow and treacherous, winding through jagged canyons and up crumbling cliff faces. The air grew hotter with each step until it seared Raymond's lungs, sweat sizzling on his skin. Vents in the porous rock belched jets of scalding steam. Geysers of bubbling acid boiled up from deep crevices. Raymond picked his way forward carefully, testing each step, constantly alert for any sign of danger. The hazards of this brutal gauntlet were not only environmental. Strange howls and skittering echoed from the shadows, hinting at vicious creatures lurking just out of sight. He had been climbing for hours, muscles burning with fatigue, when he came to a narrow ledge overlooking a churning lake of molten rock. The only way forward was a series of precariously balanced obsidian columns jutting up from the magma. Raymond gauged the distance, the blistering heat rolling off the lava searing his face even from here. It would be a deadly game of hopscotch to cross. One misstep would mean an agonizing, fiery death. But he had no choice. Sucking in a breath of scorching air, Raymond leaped to the first column. It wobbled beneath his feet but held. Not pausing, he jumped to the next, then the next, moving as fast as he dared. The heat was unbearable, singeing his hair, baking his skin. Halfway across, his foot slipped on a patch of crumbling rock. He teetered on the edge, arms pinwheeling, certain he was about to plunge into the hungry magma. But somehow, he regained his balance, heart hammering against his ribs. One more leap and he was on solid ground again, gulping down lungfuls of the relatively cooler air. He allowed himself a moment to steady his shaking limbs, then pressed on into the labyrinth. The heat was unbearable, even through Raymond's environment suit. Sweat poured down his face as he pushed deeper into the heart of fire, the pulse rifle heavy in his hands. The caverns were a nightmare of scorching rock and churning magma, the air thick with choking fumes that seared his lungs. He skirted the edge of a river of molten rock, the intense heat rolling off it in waves. Steam geysers burst from cracks in the cavern walls, the scalding vapor threatening to cook him alive inside his armor. Raymond gritted his teeth and pushed on, refusing to let the hellish conditions beat him. But the environment was the least of his worries. The creatures that called this place home were like something out of a fever dream. Monstrous worms, their segmented bodies as thick as tree trunks, burrowed through the rock, impervious to the magma's searing embrace. Swarms of flying insects with fire-spitting maws dove at Raymond, drawn to the heat and light of his suit. He fought them off with bursts from his pulse rifle, the weapon's energy bolts searing through chitinous hide and incinerating the bugs in mid-air. But for every one he killed, a dozen more took its place. They were endless, relentless. Time lost all meaning in the depths of the mountain. Hours bled into days as Raymond battled his way forward, running on nothing but adrenaline and sheer force of will. Every step was a struggle, every breath a fight. But he refused to give in, refused to let this place claim him. Just when he thought he could go no further, when his legs were leaden and his lungs burned with every breath, Raymond staggered into a massive cavern. It was like stepping into a cathedral, the vaulted ceiling soaring high overhead, the walls lined with pulsing veins of magma. In the center of the chamber stood a towering monolith of obsidian, its surface covered in intricate alien glyphs that seemed to writhe and glow in the hellish light. And there, waiting at the base of the monolith, was the Suliban leader. The alien clicked its mandibles, compound eyes glittering as it regarded Raymond. "Impressive, human," it said, its tone almost grudgingly respectful. "You have passed the trials of the heart of fire, but there is one final challenge before you can claim victory." With a hiss, the Suliban leader unsheathes its scythe arms, the blades gleaming wickedly in the magma's light. "Prove yourself against me in single combat. Only then will you have truly earned your place among the legends of this world." Raymond unslung his pulse rifle, ignoring the screaming protest of his exhausted muscles. He was battered, beaten, pushed beyond the limits of human endurance. But he was not broken. Not yet. He stepped forward to meet the Suliban leader's challenge, the final trial. The alien warrior loomed before him, a nightmare of chitin and blade, its eyes glinting with cruel anticipation. The Suliban leader moved first, scythe arms blurring as it lunged forward. Raymond ducked under the slashing blades, feeling the wind of their passage against his face. He brought his rifle up, finger tightening on the trigger, but the alien was too fast. It slapped the weapon aside with contemptuous ease, sending it skittering across the cavern floor. Raymond dove after it, rolling to avoid a downward slash that cleaved into the rock where he'd been a heartbeat before. His fingers closed around the rifle's grip, and he came up firing, energy bolts stitching a line up the Suliban's torso. But the alien's armor held, the bolts splashing harmlessly off its chitinous plates. It surged forward, shrugging off the barrage, its blades seeking Raymond's flesh. A scythe blade slipped past his guard, scoring a line of fire across his chest. Raymond cried out, stumbling back, his hand clasped to the wound. The Suliban leader loomed over him, mandibles clicking in triumph. "Yield, human," it hissed, scythe arms poised to strike. "You have fought well, but you are beaten. Accept your fate with honor." Raymond glared up at the alien, blood seeping between his fingers. Every inch of him screamed in agony, his body pushed beyond its limits. It would be so easy to give in, to let it end. But he was human, and humans didn't quit. With a wordless roar of defiance, Raymond surged to his feet, bringing his rifle up in a final, desperate charge. He slammed into the Suliban leader with bone-crushing force, driving his shoulder into the alien's chest. The impact sent them both tumbling to the ground. Raymond pinned the alien beneath him, hammering his rifle butt into its face again and again, until purplish ichor spattered his armor, and the Suliban leader went limp. Chest heaving, Raymond rolled off his vanquished foe and staggered to his feet. He stood over the fallen alien, rifle aimed at its head, finger tense on the trigger. The Suliban leader looked up at him, compound eyes flickering weakly. "Finish it," it clicked, mandibles twitching. "Claim your victory." Raymond hesitated. Slowly he lowered his rifle. "No," he said, his voice raw and ragged. "I'm not going to kill you. You said if I passed your trials, I was free to go. I'm holding you to that." The alien made a strange chittering sound, almost like laughter. "You are a strange creature, human. You have bested me in fair combat. By the laws of my people, your life is yours. You have earned the right to leave this place." With a grunt of pain, the Suliban leader pulled itself to its feet. "Go then. Your ship awaits, but know this. You have made an impression on the Suliban this day. Your name will be spoken with reverence among our warriors." Raymond nodded wearily. He slung his rifle over his shoulder and turned to leave, every step an agony. But as he limped towards the cavern's exit and the promise of escape, he couldn't help the fierce grin that tugged at his lips. He had done it. Against all odds, he had survived this planet's trials. He had proven himself not just to the Suliban, but to himself. He emerged from the tunnels into the searing, toxic daylight. In the distance, he could see the glint of metal, a ship waiting to take him away from this hellish world. It was over. He had won. But even as relief washed over him, Raymond knew that a part of him would always remain here, forged in the fire and blood of this place. He had been tested to his limits and beyond, and he had emerged changed, transformed. He was no longer just Raymond Stevens, survivor. He was something more, and the universe would never be the same. Raymond exploded into motion, his pulse rifle spitting searing bolts of energy at the Suliban leader. The alien moved with blinding speed, its exoskeleton deflecting the shots as it closed the distance. Scythe arms slashed through the air, seeking to eviscerate the human. Ducking and rolling, Raymond barely managed to stay ahead of the deadly onslaught. His muscles screamed with exhaustion, his reflexes dulled by months of unrelenting struggle. The Suliban leader pressed its advantage, driving Raymond back with a flurry of slashes and strikes. Desperate, Raymond's eyes darted around the chamber, seeking anything that could give him an edge. They fell upon one of the magma flows crisscrossing the cavern floor, an idea sparking to life. With a burst of effort, he maneuvered towards the molten stream, luring the Suliban leader after him. As the alien lunged in for a killing blow, Raymond dropped to the ground and lashed out with a kick, putting every last ounce of his strength behind it. His boot connected with the Suliban's legs, sweeping them out from under it. The alien chieftain stumbled, its balance failing for a crucial instant. Raymond seized his chance. He launched himself at the Suliban, tackling it with the force of pure desperation. Together they tumbled over the edge and into the magma flow. The molten rock engulfed them, searing heat and blinding agony wiping out all other sensation. In that instant, Raymond was certain he was dead. But then through the haze of pain he felt a sudden jolt. Scythe arms, glowing white-hot from the heat, closed around him and dragged him up, out of the magma. The Suliban leader hauled Raymond back onto solid ground, both of them smoking, their armor seared and blackened. For a long moment, they simply lay there side by side, too spent to move. The only sound was the labored rasp of their breathing and the bubbling hiss of the magma. Then, with a pained clicking of its mandibles, the Suliban leader slowly pushed itself upright. It extended a scythe arm to Raymond, helping the human to his feet. Never before, it clicked. its voice thin with pain and something like awe. Has an outsider shown such courage and tenacity? You have more than proved your worth, human. You have earned the respect of the Suliban, and your freedom from this world. With that, the alien turned and began to lead Raymond out of the heart of fire. Raymond followed, each step a supreme effort of will. As they emerged from the caverns, a group of Suliban warriors came into view, standing beside what looked to be a salvaged escape pod. Raymond understood. They meant to carry him up to the TSS Deliverance waiting in orbit. As he climbed into the pod, preparing to leave the hellish world that had been his crucible, Raymond felt a strange sense of connection to the alien warriors who had been his adversaries and, at the last, his unlikely saviors. He had survived the unsurvivable, and in doing so, forged a bond of respect that transcended species and worlds. As Raymond limped towards the waiting escape pod, the Suliban warriors parted to let him pass. But even through the haze of exhaustion and pain, he realized something was amiss. The Suliban leader, the one who had challenged him, fought him, and ultimately saved his life, was nowhere to be seen. Raymond turned to the nearest warrior, his brow furrowed. "Where is your leader?" he asked, his voice rough with fatigue and concern. "The one who battled me in the heart of fire." The Suliban clicked its mandibles, a sound that Raymond's translator interpreted as a sigh of sorrow. "The High Chieftain did not survive," it said, its synthesized voice flat and emotionless. "The wounds from the magma, they were too severe. It sacrificed itself to save you, human, a final act of honor and respect." Raymond staggered as if struck, his mind reeling. He had thought that both he and the Suliban leader had emerged from the magma unscathed, but now the horrible truth sank in. The alien had given its life for him, even after all their bitter conflict. It was a final, stunning act of nobility from a being he had once considered his mortal enemy. Tears stung Raymond's eyes as he bowed his head, overwhelmed by a surge of grief and gratitude. The Suliban leader's sacrifice was a debt he could never repay, a burden he would carry for the rest of his days. But it was also a gift, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, in the most hostile of worlds, bonds of respect and understanding could still be forged. With a heavy heart, Raymond climbed into the escape pod. As the hatch sealed shut and the rockets ignited, he took one last look at the hellish planet that had forever changed him. Part of him would always remain here, amidst the scorching heat and choking fumes. Part of him would always be bound to the alien warrior who had given everything to ensure his survival. As the escape pod tore through the atmosphere, speeding towards the waiting TSS Deliverance, Raymond closed his eyes. He had endured the unendurable, survived the unsurvivable. But the cost had been high, paid in blood and sacrifice. The scars he bore were not just physical but emotional, psychological. He knew with a bone-deep certainty that he would never be the same. The pod shuddered as it docked with the Deliverance. The hatch hissed open, and Raymond found himself greeted by a rush of cool, sterile air and the concerned faces of the ship's medical team. They helped him out, supporting his battered body, peppering him with questions he lacked the energy to answer. But as he was led away to the medbay, Raymond paused, looking back one last time at the viewport and the dwindling shape of the planet below. A final silent nod, a gesture of respect and farewell to the world that had reshaped him, to the alien warrior who had defined him. Then he turned away, ready to face the challenges of his new life, forever changed by the crucible he had endured. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.